Hello, amazing watercolor card artists. I am here with a really fun tutorial on how I like to paint or create with a palette knife. It is so much fun. I put watercolor on a piece of paper and then I just move my watercolor around from the tube with a palette knife, and I just have fun. It is a blast to try. And then when we're all done, you get this beautiful landscape, urethral, dreamy landscape that is so fun to like maybe stamp birds or a fairy on, but I just have fun. And so this is my process on how I kind of let watercolor paint itself and enjoy the process. So come along with me. It's so fun and you're going to enjoy the process. So what you're going to need is, I'm using Pointer Art Pro paper, 9x12, 200 pound, it's acid free, and I just tore it out of this paper pack. And I really do love this paper, and I'm going to make a fun landscape, and the idea here is I'm going to be able to make at least 2 cards and possibly some extra for backgrounds. We'll see what happens, but I do like to paint large sometimes, and I'm using a palette knife. I'm using these cute palette knives. You don't have to use a palette knife. I think they come in really handy for this technique, and then a brush to move the water on the paper. But this technique is really about letting watercolor do its thing, and I'm going to show you how you don't have to have like expensive paint to do this, and it's actually really fun. So I'm going to start with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit of just paint kind of wherever I want. That's my horizon line, and it can be whatever you want it to be. And I'm just going to add some, like wherever I see green, I'm going to add a little bit more of that brighter green. And I'm not being super, I'm just adding it to the paper. And this is what's going to happen is, I'm going to get my palette knife wet, we're going to spray, we're just going to have fun. It's really going to be just a fun thing. And then I really like violet next to green. In the color wheel, it doesn't actually make a lot of mud, and so you can get kind of really pretty colors with violet and green. And so that's my plan. We'll see kind of what happens, and I do want some pink, but I don't necessarily want it to mix with the green. So wherever there's like violet, I'm going to put the pink next to it. Okay, so I got like all these dabs, right? And now I'm just going to get my palette knife wet. And I'm actually going to, my palette knife is a little wet. I don't know if it really matters if it's wet or not. I'm going to spray this paper. So I get this nice, beautiful, like, mess happening. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this palette knife and I'm going to gently move it up a little and then move it down a little, just like that. I'm going to do that for all this whole line, and what I'm going to get is kind of an abstract thing. And what you might want to do is scrape off your palette knife just a little bit. Sometimes you don't need mud on your palette knife. But if I'm using purple, I can go all the way down. Maybe I want to go up a little bit more. Get your inner Bob Ross started. My vision of this is a springtime tree line. And I am going to use a bit of watercolor. I learned this technique in a book called Letting Watercolor Paint Itself. And see how there's like green? I couldn't necessarily get that. And yes, it does look a mess, and it's going to look messy. I like having a towel next to it because I am kind of messy by nature. I just make a mess when I create art. So if I know that about me, and I'm using a light touch on my palette knife. I'm not scraping the paper, I'm scraping the paint around the paper, and it's so fun. I really truly think this is a fun technique, and you can get some really beautiful textures and things that you can't normally get. So I'm just going to clean this palette knife off again on my, you see how much I got, but look at that, a little bit of pigment goes a long way. Okay, I'm going to spray this a little bit more. I love how it's mixing. I'm going to take my brush now, and I'm just going to figure out where I want pigment and where I don't want pigment. So if I feel like it's getting out of hand, I'm just gonna take my clean brush. It's just a clean brush. It's a little wet, drippy, but I'm just gonna kind of rein it back in, bring that color back where it needs to go, and eventually I'm gonna get this really pretty. I am tilting my paper. I want it to move. I want the watercolor to move on the paper. And I want the paint to kind of blend a bit. So that's looking really pretty. And this is a very intuitive process, so you just have to kind of go with it and realize that nothing is really perfect. So here I see a couple things. I don't love that there's this harsh edge right here. So I'm going to move that pigment around. And it's a damp brush. It's not drippy, but it's not dry. It's just a damp brush. And that's why I like using my towel. But now that there's wet water, I can really kind of move that pigment around. And this is a fun technique to use. If you are new to watercolor, do a couple sheets like this. And if you don't love it, that's okay. You had fun playing with color, and that's part of being an artist, is figuring out what you like and what you don't like. Okay, so here, I'm just gonna, I love this pink right here. I love this pink right in here. But a little goes a long way. And I really love this pink and violet happening right here, and this big bunch of green that's happening right there. This is really starting to look like a spring tree line. It does look very abstract, but once it dries a bit more, we can add in little trees and stuff. But it's pretty wet, so I'm gonna wait for it to dry. Which, you know, you can take a hair dryer if you want. A lot of artists won't use hair dryers. It's a personal preference. I don't see the harm in it. I'm just going in and I'm looking for any spots that are, any edges that are hard. Like this one is a little bit of a hard edge, so I'm going to soften that. Maybe it might be stained, but this is looking lovely. I am excited to see. And then I can add like a neutral color just to add more to it, and it's going to look like a spring tree landscape. It's going to be really pretty. And I think down here I just need a little bit of this. I need a little bit of green and a little bit of red, so I'm going to go ahead and put some green in. I'm also going to add some of that pink because I have that pink in here. I don't have red, so I'm not going to use red, but red and pink will make a neutral green, a green that's a bit more indicative to nature. And sometimes I think anyways, I love natural greens. Oh yeah, that's going to be a beautiful green. Look at that. And then I'm just going to start my, it is a little bit more pinky than I expected it to be. That's okay. I probably had purple on my brush, but I'm just going to go ahead and make my horizon line, just so I have something to go off of. And if it's a little bit more abstract for you than you like, well, that's okay. And I'm going to go ahead and just dab that in like this. And again, the idea here is not to make a perfect landscape. It's really to be more for play and to get to know your watercolor. And I feel like the more we play and the more we can get to know our watercolor, the better it's going to be. I'm just going to take a clean brush, and with this clean brush I'm just adding pigment all the way down so it can really blend on the paper. Maybe it's a lake. It looks like it could be a lake. Anyways, we're going to let that dry. That is looking really, really cool right now. And we'll be back. And I'm loving the contrast with the greens and the pinks. And it reminds me of a Midwestern like tree line in the springtime. So this is perfect. I don't know. Yeah, we'll keep it. I don't want to mess with it. Okay, I'll be back once it's dried and we'll add some more details to it. I think there's one more thing I need to do. Now this is This is one of those things that you can only do it when the paper is a little bit wet. So you see how this paper is dry more so than over here. So I want to get just a couple of trees, and I'm just going to go very lightly with my palette knife, and I'm scraping in some of the trees now very lightly. Like you can kill this painting really easily by scraping it too much. You know if you're scraping it too much if you start seeing paper move on the paper. That's when you did too much. But you can just make little trees with your palette knife. And so far we've only used the brush to move pigment. I love using the palette knife because the trees look a little bit more real. And I can even go in here and just add little lines. And I'll do this all the way through. That way when I'm ready to paint my trees, I already have my trees kind of already drawn out for me. And I just make little V's like trees have. And as long as I'm making V's, they'll look like trees. And then I can go in with a little bit more pigment and get some more of that happening. And so like here, it's pretty dry, so I'm not going to mess with that. A very light touch, and I'm holding my palette knife at the very edge, if you've noticed, and that way I stay loose, and I can also just make little organic lines that will help. And I think I'm gonna call it good. I'm afraid that if I try any more, it's just gonna lose its looseness. So I'm gonna walk away from it. I'm gonna dry it up. I do see a little bit of puddles, which is all right. That happens for all the watercolor that I did. So I'm just gonna soak it up with a paper towel. I'm gonna go all the way through. Why not? It's gonna look really pretty. And I think once it's dried, we can add a little bit of birds, and we'll cut them down to size and make some really fun little watercolor cards for it. But this part is good. I really love that violet, but anyways, I don't want a lot. I just need a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. I'm going to take my palette knife. And there's a lot on this palette, so I don't need too much. But I'm just going to use my palette knife. I'm just going to make that horizon line even stronger. And this is why I don't like to tape my board. But this way it gives a more spontaneity look. And maybe it is like a little lake or something. On the edge, I just want to pull that down. It's looking more like a lake. That's really pretty. Oh, so fun. And then I'm just going to do that again. I'm going to just move that pigment all the way down the paper. So maybe it's like a purple lake in the springtime. Maybe the sun's coming up and you see the shadows, you see the beautiful reflections of the trees. And we're going to let that dry again. Fairly natural, and while this is drying fairly natural, we can work on our trees a little bit. And so I see a couple things. I do have a little bit more pigment on, so maybe I just want to make a tree right like that. And then I'm going to take my clean brush It's very clean and it's pretty dry. And I'm just gonna take the water color that's on the tree and I'm just gonna make little branches like that. And I want to do that to a lot of the trees. So I still get that beautiful green in the background, but I'm also getting that really fun texture of the tree. And you just have to kind of play with your palette knife. But I have this is a very damp brush, it's not drippy. And I'm just moving the branches up. I'm using the paint that's on the paper to make the trees. And my trees are not always picture perfect, but that's okay. That's not the point. The point is to just make little V's and make little branches so it looks like there's a tree, right? And I think the coolest thing about doing abstract landscapes like this is that you're just giving the idea that these are trees, right? So this one I feel like just needs a little bit more darkness. Maybe not with the lines that I've created, but they just need to be, there just needs to be a little bit more form to them. Woohoo, look at that, that's looking beautiful. I'm really loving how this is turning out. And so this is like a purpley green mixture, but it has a perfect, it's the perfect color really for what I'm doing. Now this, there's a lot of white happening. I want to keep that white. I don't want to make it worse. So what I do is I'm just gonna go in with a darker shade and add more trees in the same way that I did before. And if you overwork your trees, that's okay. You learned. You can still give it away. Less is more. Like I try to really think about where I want my trees to be, and then I just kind of go with it. And there's like right here I felt like would be a good spot. It just needed some darkness, some dark values to it. And I'm using the quill brush almost as if I'm using a calligraphy brush. So I got my thick and my thin lines. So if you play with calligraphy, or if you have ever done brush lettering, you know about thick and thin lines. I will show you what I mean on a scrap piece of paper. So this is brush lettering. I just did that, but like when you go up, your line should be small. If you were to go down, I can get a big pressure. So I just I will sometimes lay my pinky right here, and then I can move my hand around, and so I can get some beautiful trees. And I'm just using the wrist. I'm keeping my pinky in the same spot. I haven't moved my pinky, and that really helps. And that way it helps control the brush, but I'm a little bit more looser. So if that helps you, and you don't have to, you can move, you just don't want to move your pinky too much. It studies. Another way is to just keep your palm right on the towel, right wherever your palm is, and you don't move your palm. The idea is to use your wrist if you can, and then study trees. Like I don't always know my trees, but I can say, oh, I remember this tree in a tree line, and it kind of went off either usually to the east because the wind is blowing it from the west, right? So I know that like my branches are going to point more towards the east. I know that's a little thing, but it really does help. So that's my idea of painting a tree, and there's more to it, but we got the color down. Now we just need a little bit more form. And I see like right here, maybe it's not grass, maybe it's just some grass, and we just see the trees popping out of the grass. You know, that's pretty too. I don't want to do that here because I love that pink. And I don't want to do it here because I love that green and the light green. But I am going to do another tree right in here. And I'm just gonna add a little bit like that. Yeah, okay. All right, as I am finishing up, I'm taking some of that light green, and I just have a thicker consistency to it. And I am gonna just kind of make my trees and make some extra leaves to go with it. I am thinking about how I'm growing my tree. Like if I was growing a tree, how would I want the leaves to look on my tree? And I'm making sure that I'm using green on lighter color paper, right? Or on top of the green that's already exists. And that just helps bring in that uniformity and rhythm. And I love it because it's so fun to just kind of play. And I can also add a little bit of that green to some of the other trees, but I have to be careful. If I put too much green on the pink, it will start to look muddy. So I'm being very careful about that. And I'm also being careful around the purple because the purple is going to outweigh the light green. So it's a push and pull sort of thing where I'm pushing my colors and my values and I'm pulling out my values to make it work. All right, well, that's the end of this video. I hope you found this to be very helpful. If you are new to watercolor, check out Pointer Watercolor. I truly enjoyed these two watercolors, and their price point is spot on for at least the tube of watercolors that I've used. I really enjoyed them. And the palette knife. If you don't have a palette knife, get one from Pointer. They are a lovely addition to have in your art studio. And I'm so grateful that you are here. Thank you so much for watching. Your support means the world to me. It really, truly does. And I can't wait to see you try this. So if you do, post on the Watercolor Cards Facebook group where I see all the art that gets posted and I share all the good things that comes from the watercolor world around us. So take care, have a lovely day, and get your fingers inky and full of watercolor.